Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to this year's Demystifying HTML panel here at Streaming Media West. My name is Christopher Meyer. I'm the Creative and Product Director for Sorensen Media. And I'm up here with two very distinguished gentlemen. To my direct right here is Jerome Worring. He is the founder of Longtail Video and the ubiquitous JW player that I think we've all used in one way or another. And over here is Jeff Malkin. He's the president of encoding.com. So I wanted to start by a little show of hands. I wanted to see how many of you out there are considering an HTML5 strategy for your website. How many of you? Okay, that's great. How many of you have actually already converted your website to HTML5? Okay, a couple. How about HTML5 using the video tag specifically for your videos? A few. Okay, that's great. All right. So I think my last question is, how many of you have heard about HTML5, but you're not exactly sure where to start? Obviously, it's a big deal, and you're not sure where to start and what it all means. Okay. I thought that might be a good place to start. Just kind of get accustomed to the basics at first. I know this term HTML5, we hear it kind of used a lot right now, and it reminds me a lot of maybe 5 or 6 years ago when everybody was using the term Ajax, right? Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Obviously not the guy in Iliad, but it seemed like every VP was using it in investor meetings as much as possible because it was very much a buzzword. And at the time I remember thinking, well, what does this mean for developers? What does this mean for website owners? And most of all, what does that mean for the customer and obviously the end web user interface? How is that improving people's experience online? How is it helping the internet? So I think it's a very similar situation with HTML5 right now. We have emerging technology, and not everybody's sure exactly what it is and how to use it. So my first question is for Jerome here. And that's the basics. What exactly is HTML5, and why should I use it? What's the point? If I have a website using XHTML that works pretty well, why should I convert over to HTML5?
Now, as to what is HTML5, I think the very basic is HTML5 video is just a tag, like an image tag, that is supported by HTML5. So you put a video tag in your website, you say the source is this video, and it will play. You don't have to use Flash or Silverlight or other difficult tools or plugins. So it's a very basic way of embedding video in your website. And then as to why should I use it, I think there's two answers. There's a long-term answer in that if you have support in HTML5 itself, it's a lot easier to support, like to have video interact with other stuff on your website. It's a lot easier for accessibility purposes to be able to have blind people, deaf people jump into your video and see it in alternate ways. It's a lot easier for search engines like Google to actually pick up the video. They have a lot of trouble right now because everybody has their own Flash player. It's very opaque and difficult to look into that and actually find the video and index it. So those are more the longer term promises of HTML5. And in terms of short term, it's very simple. Apple does not support Flash, so
that's the big elephant in the room.
Yeah. So and it is the elephant in terms of mobile support. And so you do need to use that video tag if you want to serve to both iPhones and iPads.
Great. Okay, so my next question is for Jeff. What am I missing out on if I don't use HTML5, and what am I gaining? And most importantly, how does it help me as a business to refactor and start using HTML5?
Well, let me start by giving a little perspective on where we're coming from. I think all of us on the panel here, we're dealing with a lot of customers who want to answer the simple question, can you just take my video and just make it work for everybody? Right? And that's what we're all here for. HTML5 is very challenging. The technologies are changing. more and more mobile phones and devices and set-top boxes, you have this great video, you just want people to be able to view it. And the promise of HTML5 is interesting, and you brought up Ajax earlier. I kind of go back to the mobile days. I used to run a mobile application company way before, where the smartphones were Symbian. There was no, iPhones, there was no app stores. And if any of you remember that time period, Java was this environment where you could create an app once and have it work everywhere. And that was the true promise of Java. And I see some heads nodding. But the reality was Sony Ericsson's version of Java was very different than Samsung's and Nokia's, et cetera. So that dream never came to fruition. And that is one of the biggest challenges we're seeing with HTML5 video today as well. We're going to talk more about that. So I think when you're considering HTML5 versus Flash, are you looking to develop for an open platform versus a proprietary platform? That's a pretty key issue. Jerome mentioned earlier Apple. That's remains the elephant in the room, at least in the short term. If you want your video working on iPads and iPhones, which from the encoding.com perspective, still dominate the views across mobile devices, even though Android's catching up on sales, not on views yet. I think that there's a groundswell from consumers who don't want to, who appreciate not having to use a plugin, at least on the web experience of, viewing their videos. So I think those are the reasons that you need to be considering it. But I think, again, I'm going to come back to that. I think that what I view as the most important reason for to be considering HTML5 video is the mobile video strategy. And mobile video is starting to dominate views.
Okay, well, let's see here. You can see we're definitely starting to touch on video quite a bit with HTML5. So we've established it's a tag, video tag that we place on our HTML. It's a semantic tag. As we know, if anyone's taken a look at HTML5 at all, we have a whole bunch more semantic-based tags. Semantic being the tag represents directly, content-wise in the code, what it means. It's very basic. If you have a header tag, that means that's the header of your site. If you have a footer tag, that's the footer of your site. It's that simple. So we have this video tag. I want to quickly clarify and quantify the confusion surrounding some of the codecs that we use in this video tag. So we've got H.264, WebM, OGG, Fiora. Do all of these work using the HTML5 video tag?
Yeah, they all work in some browsers. So, you have if in order to give a complete overview, so you have FLV, which is a little bit the outdated format from Flash. That's not working anywhere in HTML5. You have H.264, which is the big ubiquitous format. That's actually working in all browsers except for Firefox. And then you have WebM, and WebM is the open source, alternative to H.264. And WebM is working in Firefox and Chrome, so Chrome does both, but not in all other browsers.
Yeah, I have to keep going back to the wiki site so I can see as that chart gets updated, every month.
Yep.
What version of what browser.
And it's a slightly different implementation in some of the browsers, right? So IE, for example, is a plugin, whereas something like Chrome is a little bit different, right?
Yeah, although that's being worked on behind the scenes. I think we do a lot of tests every now and then, how HTML5 works, and from a JavaScript developer or website builder point of view, there's actually all the web browsers have very rigid implementations these days. So it's working really well. The only difference or the only problem is the codec. You need to support all your web browsers. Or you need one, you pick H.264, and then you use the Flash plugin for Firefox. That's the other option.
Okay. So the next question I think is for Jeff. Can we shed some light on some of the corporate interests involved here? Because obviously we have different browsers supporting different codecs and things like that. Obviously HTML5, according to W3C, should be open source and should be available you know, in all ways to everyone. That's the whole point of W3C, the Web Standards Commission. So it seems like there's some battle lines. Can you kind of clarify that a little bit for us and explain?
Well, I mean, if the question is why doesn't Google, Microsoft, Apple, and Adobe agree on a standard? We all have our own theories on that. I look at it as two battle lines, I think. One is Apple versus Adobe, or Apple versus Flash, Steve Jobs versus Adobe. I think if you're Steve Jobs, why do you need this third-party platform getting in the middle of your videos playing beautifully on iOS devices? You don't. I also think that Apple has a dominant play in the application space and an application store, and they don't want another development platform running on their devices and Flash. So, and then Steve will talk about the performance hit, which is true as well. So I think one battle line is there where Apple is by far the dominant force behind pushing HTML5 video, and then I think the other battleground is around the codec licensing. So I think many of us in this room would probably agree that H.264 is a great format. It's pretty dominant. Why is that not the universal standard? And it's not royalty free. So Google made an interesting move in acquiring Onto, I think it was about a year ago, and taking their high quality VP8 codec and open sourcing it, and we're making it royalty free. And my take on that was hopefully to put pressure on MPEG-LA, who manages the patent portfolio for H.264, to finally open up and make it royalty free. And that hasn't quite happened yet. We've seen some, I think MPEG-LA has made some decisions around how they're going to prosecute or pursue these royalties. But I think those really are the two battlegrounds driving it. And again, going back to the old Java days, everybody's got their own billions of dollars at stake, and when you're running on your own devices or your own browsers, there are certain things that you're going to do from a feature perspective or tweaking engineering perspective that are going to make those videos work better on your own browsers and devices, and therefore you're going to continue to have this kind of bifurcation and move away from a standard format.
Yeah, so it seems like that's going to affect obviously the developers and the business owners in the space quite a bit.
Yeah, it's very challenging. I mean, in the end, what does that mean? That means that you, as a content publisher, have to take your source video and convert it to X number of output flavors so that it's going to work on all these devices, and then do the device detection and make sure that you're serving up the right video. As an example, one of our products is called Vidly, which is about trying to deliver a universal video URL. And currently, we are producing 25 output formats for every single source video that will work across all the devices, browsers, and market. And that number is growing. So it's not shrinking, it's growing. What do you have to consider is cost of transcoding into multiple flavors, the storage costs for those multiple flavors, and the device detection, how you can do that. And there's no doubt that it's a complex beast.
Yeah, and the multiple flavors that he's speaking about often is called adaptive bitrate, and there are actually several different versions of that as well. So yeah, it all seems a little bit overwhelming. I mean, this is for Jerome. What really makes HTML5 video stronger than Flash? Seems like right now, this is really going to be difficult for me as maybe a small website owner. Why shouldn't I just use Flash? I mean, what's the difference, and what are the strengths and the weaknesses of each?
So, like business-wise, if you use Flash, you're not on Apple. So that's a very simple answer. If you look at it technically, well, actually, I think what you can say business-wise also, you won't be on iDevices, but what you're also seeing is that more and more mobile platforms are also moving into HTML5 and not doing Flash. So you have Windows Mobile, which Micro, with the whole Windows Nokia acquisition like merger. And there is BlackBerry that also supports HTML5, and there is more operating systems like Samsung's Bada, which are not popular here but popular in other countries that also do HTML5. So HTML5 seems to be the format for mobile. And right now you have Android running Flash, but actually none of the other guys are running Flash. So perhaps that will, at a certain point, if you're looking at mobile today, then you might as well say, all right, I'm doing HTML5 for all my mobile devices. and that way, like, you're done across the board.
Yeah, there's no doubt, right, that Flash is a more mature platform, right? And it's, you know, it's obviously proprietary, but if you know, around features like DRM and monetization and other security, you know, HTML5 is not quite there yet. But you know, it's an open platform that everyone seems to be motivated to develop for. So we're seeing rapid innovation around HTML5 where you're not, so, you know, where Flash is, it's catching up very quickly.
Right.
Yeah, so all the new platforms are basically going HTML5. So you see that with the phones, and you also see that on the the connected TV side, where like Xbox, PlayStation, LG, Samsung, all these guys are basically supporting HTML5 instead of Flash.
So it seems like with that groundswell moving in that direction, the performance from a video perspective might be a little bit better than Flash.
Yeah, I don't think it's like hard performance. So Flash performance is actually pretty good. Also on Android, like there's a lot of opinions about it. But if you actually like do some tests, like the Flash, playing a video in Flash on Android or playing a video in HTML5 on Android, they're both pretty solid implementations. I think what you really see is that there is something in between the browser and the video. So that that additional layer and that Flash, that is causing all kinds of just small user issues. If you load a video in HTML5, it's boom, it's there on your page, like the instant the page is loaded. And if you load it in Flash, like there's first a spinning wheel because the Flash runtime is loading. If you swipe through your page, then all of a sudden you hit a Flash element. You're actually not swiping your page because it's not part of the page. It's a black box on the page, so your scrolling will stop, and the video, whatever was there, the ad, will pop up, and you'll get redirected to the website. So it's more those kind of annoyances that that you see with Flash and that are not there with HTML5 video.
Right. And there's still a short term, however long it might be, where if you really want ubiquitous video, you're still going to develop for both, because you need your Flash fallback, especially if you're considering web, delivery as well. You need your Flash fallback. Be there, at least I'm in San Francisco, we tend to live in our own little tech bubble world where everyone's on iPhone 4G or 4S, whatever the latest one is. And the reality is, lots of people out there using older browsers that are pre-HTML5 compatible. So in the short term, you need to be considering both.
Yeah, as a web developer myself, I definitely see one more advantage I think that we haven't mentioned yet about an HTML5 video, which is the ability to style your player with simple CSS3, right? So when you're dealing with a Flash situation, obviously you have to have an application to do that is made by a company called Adobe. And Adobe's great, but it's really nice to be able to simply, get in my editor and change the look, the colors, the buttons, anything I want, just via CSS. So that's another advantage to sort of that open source movement that the W3 has started with HTML5. So I think I'd like to shift it over a little bit more over to mobile, because obviously that's a really important aspect of all of this. I don't know what that little bell was, but first, by show of hands, how many people out here watch videos on your iOS or Android mobile device on a weekly basis? Yeah, so just about everybody. How about your tablet, like an iPad or a Galaxy or something? Just about everybody. So I was reading an article yesterday. I can't remember what the numbers were, but this year, starting at the beginning of the year, the smartphone consumption numbers and the smartphone sales have far, far, far exceeded personal computer sales. Okay, so it really behooves all of us as website creators to consider a mobile strategy moving forward. And video obviously is a really big part of that. So I think we can all see pretty clearly a world where customers are accessing our websites from mobile devices before the browser in the computer. And there's a bunch of things that we can do, such as design. We can do progressive. We can use a library like jQuery, jQuery Mobile. So there's a lot of really interesting things I think we can do right now to prepare our websites for that movement. So I have a question for both Jeff And here, let's explain to us how HTML5 relates to mobile video delivery strategy, specifically. Like, what would you have to say about something like that?
Well, let's talk about iOS first. And that's where I'm most familiar. But with iOS, from a delivery perspective, you have two options, really, right? You have straight up progressive download via MP4 container, or you have what's called HTTP live streaming, HLS. Most of you know what that is? So it's adaptive bitrate versus progressive, or another way of saying that, if adaptive bitrate means that the iPhone or the iPad is constantly checking the network for what the available bandwidth is, and as that bandwidth changes every 10 seconds, it's actually switching the stream on the fly from different level of bitrate, a high bitrate, mid bitrate, low bitrate, and frankly an audio only still image that no one on the planet uses, but yet is required. So some reason. And those are the options. I mean, I would, strongly urge, going down the HTTP live streaming route. It's a much better experience for end users. It's not that complicated to do now, and more and more providers, such as everyone up on the dais here, and can provide tools so that you can do that. If you're trying to do HTTP live streaming on your own, it can be complex. It means you're taking a source video, you're chunking it into 10-second or less chunks. You're segmenting in 10-second or less chunks. And then each of those 10-second clips, you are encoding into 4 different bit rates, and then each has a stream instruction file that goes along with that. So, a 10-minute video can produce, 1,000 files. It gets a little unwieldy to manage. Yet, the experience for the end user, which I think most of us would agree is most important, is a better, more seamless experience. So those are your two options, at least with mobile delivery to iOS.
Yeah. Does adaptive bitrate work in Flash as well?
Yep. Yeah. There's Adobe has its own version, basically, of HLS, which they call HDS. So it's just one letter, different acronym.
Right.
Yeah, but it does the same. It does the same.
Yeah.
And then Microsoft has theirs.
Smooth.
Yeah. I think it would be useful if maybe we go through with everybody what the different flavors of adaptive bitrate are, and what they mean from a customer's perspective. Like, which one should I use, and which ones, in your opinion, are some of the better?
So the worst is probably HLS, but that's the one you should use, because that's the one that's supported by iPhones and iPads. It's like technically it's the most restricted, and it's like a weird mixed bags of technology, but it's like the only format that is supported on iOS. And as I said, it's also the format that's supported on a couple of these connected TVs, Xbox,
Roku,
PlayStation,
yes,
Roku, Boxy. So if you want to go to connected TV, you need it. If you want to go to iOS, you need it. And then there is smooth streaming for Silverlight. You can go to the desktop with that, but you can go to the desktop with Flash and HTML5 as well. So. It's probably the best technology of the three, but it's actually it's not required from a business point of view, because you have options there. And Adobe's version is, in terms of technology, so it's a little bit in between. It's working fine. You can go to Flash. I think the only as it relates to RTMP, so the system that you would usually use to stream to Flash, the only guy that will be pushing for HTTP instead of RTMP is your CDN, because there is on the CDN side there's quite a lot of optimizations that you have, but I think on both on the encoding side and on the playout side, there's not that much of a difference between what you do today with RTMP, where you can also do the dynamic streaming, and what you could do with HDS, so HTTP dynamic streaming. It's just it's a new format, and make sure that you check your user base, because not everybody has the version of Flash installed that can use it. So if you have a user base in which 25% of people cannot run HDS, it's actually, you probably want to wait before you want to move on.
And correct me if I'm wrong, though, that HLS can be served via any HTTP streaming, any HTTP stream server, whereas Adobe would require a Flash Media Server.
Yeah, I think that's also a big advantage of HLS because it's such a bare bone protocol. You can put it in, you can drop it on any web server, like you drop it on CloudFront, and it will work on any device. Both for Smooth and for HTS, you actually need specific server extensions installed.
Right. Yeah. And if you're looking to support all the adaptive bitrate streaming methodologies, there's great products out there like Wowza and others where their server will handle it for you.
That's interesting. So I think the consensus is that moving forward with HTML5 and video, an adaptive bitrate strategy is extremely important to serve media to the mobile devices in the most effective way, and also things like the desktop computers and the set-top boxes as well.
Yeah, I would say even more on mobile because you're moving around.
Right.
Right, and so your bandwidth is constantly changing, more so than if you were static sitting at your desktop. Which yes, there are changes, but it's quite varied when you move from a Wi-Fi and you walk outside. Now you're using 3G, and being able to have those streams shift.
It also seems like it would be a bit useful when I'm hanging out in my house and I'm trying to get Netflix to look really good. And obviously, when everybody else is watching it at the same time in my neighborhood,
right.
I think that something like that could really help. So I think that's the bulk of the questions that I had for these guys. And I think it's really important to open it up for questions for all of us. So I'd love to get some interaction from you guys and just go ahead and start lobbing questions at us. I don't think we have a microphone to pass around, but I think it should be pretty easy to hear you. And if you have a question, if you could stand up, and I'll repeat it back so the video camera catches it. And you can aim a question at any one of us. Gentleman here?
For adaptive streaming, can you talk about Dash?
Okay, so the question was for adaptive streaming, could we talk about Dash a little bit? And
so there's 3 streaming flavors today, which is HLS from Apple, there's HDS from Adobe, and there's Smooth from Microsoft. Now the guys that have built H.264, the MPEG, like the motion picture group, they're also looking into creating their own flavor. And what they're trying to do there is basically come up with a standardized adaptive streaming protocol, and that's called Dash. And it's in the drawing board, more or less. The protocol itself is finished. There are some test implementations. I think it has. It's looking good. It's got a lot of functionality. People from both Adobe, Microsoft, and Apple are very actively participating in creating that standard. Like everybody wants their own features in there, basically. I think what will Dash has, so it's something that only exists in theory today, but I think it has a good chance of becoming the standard for adaptive bit rates 2 years from now, 3 years from now, when there is when all the browsers and when all the services will start supporting that. Yeah. So it's a standard for adaptive streaming, not there yet, but coming.
And we feel like it's going to support all the browsers, all the different codecs, all the different protocols, this type of thing.
Yeah. Perhaps the person who asked the question could. But I think that so Dash is looking into.
As it's specified, it's using the technique tools.
Yeah.
But I'm with the WebM project.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, we've done it. I mean, but you can use other formats with it. It's just that in the specification itself, will only specify how to do it with codecs and limitations.
We've written a spec for how to do it with WebM, basically taking the Troska clusters and all that, stuff that nobody needs to know about. But so we're looking at it pretty closely. We're making a sample implementation of it in Chrome with WebM, and we hope that it certainly becomes the standard. It seems to be pretty well designed. There are some outstanding questions about the license that it's offered under. It's ostensibly a royalty-free license, but there are some people with IP claims who are doing RAND licensing of it. So essentially they're specifying a royalty-free license for certain uses, but not for others. So
Sounds a bit like H.264.
Well, it's the same guys. So hopefully that'll get smoothed out, but we're pretty excited about it and optimistic that it'll take off.
Yeah, I
But
think
as Jordan said, it's going to take a while.
Yeah, it will take years. It will take years, but it has a good chance. I think what's also important is that as it comes to Dash, a lot of people from the broadcast world are involved. So it's not just internet, it's not just desktops and phones, but also a lot of people from like IP, TV related organizations are pushing for it really hard. Everybody wants to go to HTTP as the single delivery protocol for video.
And the transport stream support.
And the other nice thing about Dash, well, I mean, at least the way we're implementing it, is you don't have to chunk it into a bazillion files. It just uses contiguous files. We can do the byte requests on the client side. So the server's even dumber than it is with HLS. It's just files that can be served as single streams. Anybody else is just getting the byte request depending on the available bandwidth.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you very much. This gentleman here. Maybe if I should have had you introduce yourself. If you could introduce yourself real quick before you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Brian Huss from MTV Networks.
All right.
Question about what your guys' thoughts on iOS apps. I mean, our current strategy has been to bring an HTML5 JavaScript-based player in via WebView, but we've had some internal discussion about like to get the performance we want, do we need to build like a native Objective-C player, or I'm just kind of interested where you guys see the landscape going for in apps from a video playback standpoint.
I think so. From like a technical perspective, video playback doesn't matter. Like you dump it into the same framework, whether you do it in an app or in the web browser. As to whether you should build apps or build native or build websites, I think probably apps are better if you can afford it, because you are in more control. iOS, there's not that much difference, but especially on Android, when there's like a mixed bag of streaming systems that you can use, you can really pick one and in the application layer completely control that. If you're a small, like if you do not have the resources to build an iOS, an Android, and Windows Phone app, then obviously there's just HTML5, and I think over time everything will converge to HTML5. But today, an app makes sense.
Yeah, and if you don't know, if you're going to create video apps for iOS, at least, you have to use HTTP live streaming to get your app approved. So, which creates a better end user experience, but more costs, more length of time, etc.
Yeah, I think I could add a little something to that too, which is slightly different than what these guys said. Often I find as a UI designer, it's nice to have video that is directly accessible from a link via Google or another search engine. And this is why we know from having studied these kind of things that you get to a website, you look up something on there, okay, there's a link, I click on the link, it's going to open a web page. So that's why I was kind of advocating for having a mobile website strategy, whether it's responsive design, meaning you use CS3 media queries to change the aspect of the website to suit whatever device it detects, or the use of a library like a jQuery mobile or Windows, something along those lines. That's strong because as soon as you click the link, a website is open and there's a video, and your user is immediately interacting with that, right? So it's a little bit better sometimes for a smaller business. You get to a page like that and, okay, download the app. Well, that's 1-2 clicks. So as UI designers, we study how many clicks you need to use to get to the content or the media or the conversion. And I think that in the case of an app, that's fantastic, but I don't think we should sell the use of a really smart mobile website strategy as well, just for the sake of that ease of initial interaction.
Yeah. Although on the other hand, if you have an app and you're there on the phone's homepage, like they'll interact with it more and more.
That's right.
Way more than if you're buried inside the browser. I think that's a little bit the trade-off that you have to make as well.
So it's almost like you need both.
Yeah.
Usually it's the middle road. This gentleman right here.
Thank you. I'm Anthony Helm, Dartmouth College. I'm probably one of the odd ducks here in the room as that goes. I'm curious if there's any more or less concern with HTML5 in terms of content protection, security kind of things.
Yeah, I think there's more concern right now because it's not a mature platform yet with specifically, I mean, HTML5 is designed to be an open platform. So you have a lot of third-party development happening right now around DRM and other kind of security. But I think if that was your number one concern, Flash is going to, in the short term, is going to be a better route, certainly.
Yeah, HLS has not like completely locked down DRM, but you can encrypt your videos. So if somebody intercepts them, like you still would not be able to play them. So you can still do DRM video in Flash and then encrypted video to iDevices over HTML5. So you still have both worlds and still have secure video.
Thank you.
Let's see, in the back there?
My name is Abhishek Girotra. I work for Intel Corporation. I have 3 quick questions. One is, do the browser companies pay for the royalties, like for example for H.264, and is like VP8 going to be on the roadmap for HTML5? And then hardware acceleration, is there any capability for HTML5 to hardware accelerate on different platforms?
Maybe the WebM gentleman wants to answer the first question.
So the question was surrounding browsers licensing of the codecs that we've been mentioning, and specifically VP8.
Sure. Yeah, if you ship a product with an H.264 decoder in the product, you owe, the licensing terms are very complicated, but essentially anything over 100,000 units, you owe in PEG-LA 20 cents a unit up to an annual cap of $6.5 million per business unit. It's very, what it boils down to is yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, thank you. This is my colleague Matt from the WebM. But it boils down to yes, you're on the hook for it if you are the one shipping the product. You asked, did I answer the question?
Yep.
Okay. In a lot of cases, device makers will, if you have video frameworks where the device itself has a hardware part on it to do the decoding, they are shipping the quote decoder, so they pay the. It's all very complicated and kind of messy. VP8 on the roadmap was your question?
Second question, VP8, is VP8 going to be part of HTML5 browser decoding?
The second question is, will VP8 be part of HTML5 browser decoding?
It already is today.
It already is.
Yeah, in
it's-
several browsers. So it's working in Firefox, it's working in Chrome, it's working in Opera.
Yeah, Matt and I are doing a session tomorrow through 11:30. If you want to come to that, I've assembled a lot of numbers about the market share today of browsers that support WebM, and it's about, of all the browsers in use in the world, according to StatCounter, it's now about 45% support WebM. So with an HTML5 browsers, it's 90-something%. So it's, yeah. And third question.
Third question was about hardware acceleration.
The third question was about hardware acceleration. Do you mean something like a GPU acceleration?
Like for example, yeah, GPU acceleration through like DXV on Windows or VAPI on the Linux side or
Okay.
other APIs?
Yeah, I think that's also, so it's not there yet, but coming.
No, it's there. It depends which part of the stack you mean. With WebGL, I mean, for example, Chrome today does hardware rendering of the render, acceleration of the rendering, the scaling, the color conversion, the codec decoding itself. If there's a 264 decoder there, we use it. WebM today, we are working with all the major chip people to bring VP8 decoding to hardware, like directly in the silicon. But this whole race started last year between Microsoft and Firefox and Google. Everybody was just racing to get acceleration of certain parts of the video experience into the browser, and that's pretty well, at least in Internet Explorer 9, Chrome, and Firefox, they do a pretty decent job.
Yeah, and all the mobile platforms is indeed except for the decoding of VP8.
Right.
On all mobile platforms today, the entire stack is hardware accelerated. So everything's done by the GPU.
And so if you look, but if you also look at the decoding complexity of EP8 is very, it's pretty minimal as far as codecs go. So on the way we kind of look at it is the difference between a battery-powered device and a device with a power source. A device with a power source, the performance is better with hardware rendering and scaling, but the codec, at least VP8 decoding the bit stream is not that intensive, but on a battery-powered device, you obviously want that battery to last as long as possible. So on a battery-powered mobile device, doing VP8 decoding hardware makes total sense and is something that we're aggressively pursuing with all.
Oh, thank you, thank you. So we've got about 5 more minutes. I want to try to get a couple more questions.
So for low volume,
Can you stand up and give us your name, please?
Majid Mahmood, I'm with the ABC Group. Majid Mahmood with the ABC Group. So for low volumes, the codecs are free then? I guess if you're dealing with 10,000 volumes a year, right? So is it then
So
free?
the question was, for low volumes, are the codecs free?
Yeah.
But if you're a publisher, so as a publisher,
Right.
do you mean it from like as you publishing a couple thousand videos a year?
No, I'm more of a manufacturer side, right? On the electronic side. So if I'm dealing with only low volumes that I'm going to ship.
So you're building a device that has a video decoder in the hardware.
Embedded decoder, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you'll be paying royalties.
Okay.
Well, how many units do you?
Say 10,000.
I believe 10,000 is the lower
Yeah.
cap, but you wanna talk
Your goal
to.
is to sell 10 million, so you should worry about it.
Yeah, you should.
If you're not very ambitious.
Yeah, and in my experience, I think it's always wise to cover the
But then if you
licensing.
go over 100,000, you're gonna over.
Okay, a couple more questions. Anybody? Anybody? So I think if we don't have any more questions, I wanted to try to cover something in the last little bit of time right here. It seems like we're talking a lot about codecs and licensing. It seems like there's quite a bit of confusion around like what codecs we're using and what the licensing is going to cost us as an organization or as a business. So I was hoping maybe you could shed a little bit of light on that for us, the licensing angle.
Licensing for content publishers or?
Content publishers or device manufacturers even.
Well, I think we kind of covered that somewhat in the last couple of questions. I mean, if you're shipping product that has decoders in it, you're going to be paying licensing.
Right.
Content publishers, I think it's, this is where, I think I've read through the MPEG LA, license agreements 10 times, and I'm still not very clear on exactly where the lines are drawn. I think as a content publisher, I think what MPEG LA has basically done is pushed off until 2015. Would that be correct? You probably know better than I do. Yeah, from a content publisher perspective, at least on H.264.
I've read it 100 the way it breaks down, if you look at the licensing summary, the ABC licensing summary, they have this little pie chart that's divided into like uses. So for a content provider, what they did last year after we launched WebM is they said, okay, all video served over the internet where the user does not pay.
Per view,
Right.
yeah. It's not a paywall.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very vague. It does not pay for the video. You don't owe a royalty. That's one use case. It's subscription video where you have I think it's $100,000 a year for subscription. Yeah, that's your sort of cap for subscription service. So if you're Netflix, when serving content 264, that's what you pay. Then title by title video is broken down into anything over 12 minutes long. You owe 2 cents or the greater of 2% of the cost that the user paid for the video. So if you're renting videos $4.99 a time, you owe 2 cents. It works out to be the percentage of the cost. Now those content, for title by title is subject to $6.5 million of video. So if you're doing title by title and you're serving a whole lot of videos, you are very likely to get that.
So as a small content producer, let's say I'm the average video guy, and I'm using an encoder like a Squeeze or an Episode or something along those lines, or encoding.com, to encode my videos. Do I need to worry about licensing? Or is that handled for me with the application?
For content?
No, not for content. What if it's my own content?
Yeah, there's,
Still, doesn't
yeah.
matter whose content
Yeah.
it is. If it's encoded in H.264, you don't get another.
Yeah, there's three where like there's basically 3 points in which they like extract licensing fees. It's encoding, it's publishing, and it's decoding. So encoding is paid by Sorensen, decoding is paid by Adobe if you play in Flash, or by Google if it's or Samsung if you play it on your Galaxy. But then the publishing part is still your part.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a small firm, and I before Conference Acquired, I managed this, we did our own service, similar to going on which was growing. We never, Flix Cloud, for example, we never owed MPGA a lot of money, but it was conducive because we're starting up these AMIs again, too, every time we start it, we're keeping track of them.
Yeah.
So, and they're very strict about reporting. They will say, we want all the numbers. So
That's why we're hoping for continued success with WebM, which puts some
Yeah.
pressure.
Yeah.
Finally, able to say,
So unfortunately, everybody, we're
when I talk about all these terms, none of this applies to D3 or WebM at all.
yeah.
None of this MPG does not apply to use it as much as what
We're just about out of time here, so one more quick question.
Actually, it was in relation to that. I had a quick question on the producer side. Where did they come down on if you made money off advertisements that were served in conjunction with the media that they're consuming? So like you have ads on the side of the page.
My understanding of it, and I'm not aware of it, is that it still falls underneath the WebM.
So for like the H.264, if you're serving it, I know if you're making money
Over the
off
web, yeah, as long as you, the user, are not paying directly to do that.
So subscription, or I'm sorry, advertising is more of a passive revenue thing. I mean, the advertiser is paying per, as long as you, the user, have not paid that site to view that video, then it's not subject.
It sounds like we need another panel demystifying.
Yeah. Demystifying the licensing. All right, everybody. So we're out of time for this panel. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Stream Media West. Thank you.